Hello, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Anita, and today we're going to talk about love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not arrogant, and love is not boastful. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on having things its way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I'm going to ask you to go on a journey with me this afternoon, to embark on a journey about love. And we're going to also talk about health and nutrition. Now, how do we approach the topic of health and nutrition? We approach this topic through the vehicle that brings us together with the children and families that we work with every day. Love. Love, health, and nutrition are intimately connected for many of us. It is around food that some of us spend our most memorable moments. We have wonderful family gatherings. For many of us, food reflects our culture and who we are as human beings and members of a community. And just like food, love is essential to our survival. It is through recognition of the family's love for a child and our acknowledgement and demonstration of love for that child that we are able to engage in a conversation about health and nutrition with our families. According to the State of Obesity for a Healthier America, 38% of American adults are obese, and 8% are extremely obese. Now, with staggering statistics such as these, it is no wonder that this became a priority for America. Our journey today will hopefully encourage us to reflect upon and identify some strategies to move us to the point where we are engaging in a partnership with parents around the topic of health and nutrition. And from this partnership, we hope will provide children with a strong, healthy foundation and lead to their healthy adulthood. Now, how do we begin a discussion with families on topics such as health and nutrition when we in the field of early childhood education are part of those staggering statistics? What do we say as early childhood professionals? Urie Bronfenbrenner, in The Ecology of Human Development, reminds us that children are part of an ecological system that includes adults that we must engage. So, if we want to have a lasting effect on our students' future health and nutrition, then we must engage their families. Their families are their inner circle.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, for those of us who work in Head Start programs or NACCE accredited programs or other programs that adhere to some quality rating system, there is an expectation that we engage with families. Now, please note that I use the term engage.
So I'm curious because I'm sure we all use the word engagement in a lot of different ways. What do you mean by engaging families?
Let's use dating as an analogy, all right? When you first meet someone of interest, you're nurturing the relationship. You're trying to get to know each other, trying to feel each other out. You're spending time. You're talking. You're trying to come to a shared understanding and agreement. And hopefully, by your continued investment your continued interest, your continued sharing, this relationship will blossom into something more. A lot more. And I'm sharing this story or sharing this analogy with you because I want you to understand the depth of the term engagement. When I say engage, I'm thinking in terms of spending time, really moving beyond simple involvement. And this is the depth of the relationship or the depth of the conversation that we need to enter into with families around this topic of health and nutrition. Topics such as physical activity and healthy eating can be loaded. They can and do bring up issues around culture, values, and respect for both staff and parents. What we eat, how we eat. If you think about some of our programs, what type of a diet do we serve in our schools? If I am not from this country as a young child, you're introducing me to new foods, to new experiences. How do I feel around that? This is all brand new to me. Issues of culture, values. These are not things that I have seen. These are not things that I know. Does that mean that what I know and what I see is wrong? For many of us, food is directly associated with our culture. Think about those amazing moments of your childhood. It's nothing like something tasty to remind you of a good experience. Yes. A wonderful experience with big families around you. It also represents control over our lives. When the rest of the world is controlling me, I can control what I put into my body. Yeah. And of course, those amazing memories, those really good memories.
How do we talk about this topic that our regulating agencies are wanting us to discuss? How do we meet the standard?
That's an excellent question. I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories. So I got another one for you. When I was a child, about 7 or 8 years old, my mother and I had this ritual, a Saturday night ritual. She would grab a steak out of the fridge. We weren't wealthy, but we had the steak. This was our treat for ourselves, our weekly treat. She'd grab a steak, she'd throw it in the broiler, and we would eat this steak. Now, some might call this a very unhealthy act. Not to me. To me, I was spending time with my mom. We were laughing, we were having fun, and we were eating good food. But the food is not the important part of this. The important part of this is the time I was spending with my mom. Now, as I said, some people might have some problems with this story. First of all, we were eating very late. Secondly, I was an overweight child. And my mom had some medical issues related to diet. So it wasn't necessarily prime. But for me, it's an amazing memory. It's an amazing memory of spending time with my mom. And as educational professionals talking about health and nutrition, it's important for us not to taint or mar that memory for me. Now, as educational professionals, we need to engage in a conversation with families around healthy eating. But the conversation cannot be one of judgment about food, but one of sharing knowledge for the child and the family. Now, how do we do this? One strategy is to listen to the parent. When I ask that we listen to the parent, I am asking that you put aside preconceived notions and predetermined responses, because we're always ready. We are professionals, we are the experts, and we've got that response. But I'm asking you to put that aside and listen to what the parent has to say about what is happening. And in that process, seeking and listening for understanding and not to provide instruction, you begin to engage in a relationship with the family. The act of intentional listening helps us to build these relationships with families. By listening to the parent, you are showing interest in them and their child. Now, I truly believe that listening is the foundation to building a relationship. It is critical to engagement around any topic, but especially one where you are trying to convince someone to change their behavior.
So, are you saying that listening to a parent will make them change their eating habits?
Not at all. But I am saying that it is important to building a relationship that can lead to a conversation about healthier eating habits. Okay? Now, as we listen with an ear for learning, we must also remember to embrace the family perspective. Remember, we talked a little bit about culture earlier. So now we're embracing the family perspective. Perspective provides parents with an opportunity or an opening to hear the information we want to share. If parents see you are listening and trying to understand, they are more open to discuss things with you and open to receiving your information. Perspective taking is the ability to see the parent's point of view. Now, an example of taking the parent's perspective would be to acknowledge their best efforts. Now, remember I said I'm a storyteller, so I got another story.
Okay.
I had a couple of students, some interesting little people. One in particular came in with colored drink and chips. Blue drink, all the time. The little bottles of blue drink, I don't know if you've ever seen those, but that was the preference. Not quite sure what fruit that was representative of, but it was a blue drink. Now, when you take the parent's perspective in this situation, you acknowledge that the parent is making best efforts and is doing their very best to ensure that their child is coming to your classroom with a full stomach, not hungry, okay? That this parent has to get everyone out of the house, and I'm trying to get some food into this baby too. Now, you notice the parent's actions and tell them how committed they are to ensuring that that child comes to school eating something in the morning. Now, you don't just attack the parent with this issue of not having healthy foods first thing in the morning or the first time you see this.
Right.
You don't do it the second time you see it. You only approach this topic once you see that this is a normal part of the breakfast routine. Okay? Once you've identified that the chips and the blue drink are the mainstay for breakfast, then you share the observation with the family, with the parent. You say to that parent, I see every morning you're trying desperately to get that child to school with something to eat. And you acknowledge that and you celebrate them for that action. And then, hopefully, when the parent sees that you see that they're trying, then they'll be receptive to hearing what you have to say. And it's at that point in the conversation where you can offer a suggestion for a healthy alternative. And when you offer the suggestion for the healthier alternative, take into consideration where your families are coming from and where they live. If your families reside in a community that does not have very many healthier alternatives, not too many fresh fruit resources, possibly a food desert, then you offer other alternatives, maybe cereal bars or something like that, something that is accessible.
Okay.
And if your school or your program offers breakfast, you remind the parent that breakfast is available, and then you assure them that you're going to make sure that their child has breakfast every day. This shows the parent how much you understand and how much you care about them and the child, and that you're recognizing that they are doing their very best. Another strategy that can open up opportunity for discussion is you, as the early childhood educator, sharing your personal story. Now, first, this should be done only if you're comfortable. And it should not be too intimate. You don't need to talk about what you did last night. That's not where we're going here. It should be relevant to the situation. You're going to share a story about maybe getting your family out of the house early in the morning. And maybe you've given your child a couple of powdery sugar donuts or what have you. And if you don't choose to tell that story, maybe it's about you sharing what it was like for you as a child when your mom was rushing through the drive-thru. Now, once you share the story, you have the opportunity to share the resolution or lessons learned. Now, the Brazelton Touchpoints approach calls this going outside of your professional role. Instead of being the teacher, you show yourself as a parent or as a child, but not the expert. In some instances, sharing a little of your own experiences can encourage people to listen. Using the parent's perspective and sharing your own story cautions us from being too judgmental. Does anybody have any questions?
What do you mean when you say being too judgmental?
Now, there was an issue of uncontained stool or diarrhea in one of our classrooms. And it involved a young mom, a teen mom. We did not want to tell this mom that she needed to come and pick this child up from school. This was the second time that we had done that within a month. And so we were hesitant to call, but 3 uncontained stools, and we had to send the child home. That was our rule for our program. And the child would have to be at home for 24 hours. Okay, that was the resolution, without symptoms. So we were really hesitant to do that. And we didn't know what was going on with this kid. This baby, this was not the first time it had happened. It was actually the second. As a team, we had washed him and bathed him and changed his clothes and all those kinds of things. And we were doing everything not to have to make this call. But we had to do it. The mom was frustrated with us. The grandmother was frustrated with us. Everybody was frustrated because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what was going on in the home, and nobody was talking to anybody. Everybody was being judgmental. Everybody was not trusting in this situation. So we had to really be conscious, to make a conscious effort to build a relationship with this mom and the grandmother, because she was just as angry as her daughter at this point. So we worked on the relationship. And how did we work on the relationship? We listened. We asked her how she was doing every day, and we listened to her, and we shared the observations that we were taking. You know, we take those infant observations every day anyway, so we shared those observations instead of waiting. And we talked with them, and we kept talking, and finally we got to the point where they would engage in a conversation with us. And what we found out what's going on in the home, after we did all this work with the relationship building, the mom shared with us that she had changed the child's diet prematurely. She had actually moved him from formula to actually solid foods. And she did this because he was crying at night. She thought he was hungry. So we had to help her to understand that he wasn't hungry. There was something else going on. And once we were able to figure out what else was going on, then we could support the mom, the grandmother, and the child. And we were able to come up with a pretty decent plan for this little guy. And what we were able to come up with, we made sure that he got the medical treatment that he needed. He got the medicine that he needed. But we had to get on the same page so that we could create a plan to support both the mom and the child. When teachers and families come together in a relationship around the child, there's a shared understanding that both care deeply about the child. This shared understanding takes the relationship to the place where they can collaborate on goals for the child's success. Now, another strategy to consider using when sharing health and nutritional information involving both families and the students in your class around lessons about health and nutrition.
So when we're thinking about including those strategies, I know at my center, I don't know anyone else, but we have a prescribed curriculum. And so I'm curious about how do we incorporate that when we have a set curriculum?
That is a very good question, because we all have curriculums,
Right.
you know. But many of those curriculums, they're flexible enough and open enough that we can incorporate subjects such as health and nutrition into that curriculum. I'm calling on your creative energy here when you're thinking about these types of lessons. For example, and we all do this lesson on vegetables, right? You take a lesson on vegetables. That is a science and nutrition lesson. And then you can add a homeschool connection to that lesson. The homeschool connection, because remember we're talking about parent engagement now. The homeschool connection expands your classroom activity beyond the walls and encourages your families to engage in the learning with their child. Now, when I talk about homeschool connection, an example would be asking a parent to read a book with a child. You can ask the parent to bring in paper towel rolls or tubes for an activity associated with a vegetable lesson. Those little egg cartons, maybe we plant seeds, right?
Right.
Those are things that parents can comfortably contribute to the lesson plan. In a How Vegetables Grow lesson, you not only study the vegetables, but you can also expand that lesson to include that nutritional component. So the science aspect is learning about the seeds and the growing of the seeds. And then you can bring in the nutritional aspect when you begin to talk about the vitamins that you get from those vegetables. You can send information home to your families and send them home with the kids and ask the families to read the information with the child. They read it together, and then they talk about it after. And be sure, when you're doing this type of an activity, to share with your families that you're going to be doing this. You want to establish that expectation that you're going to be engaging the family in this way. You don't want to blindside them. Okay? And in terms of the resources, there are many resources out there to help you with this type of a project. You can go to, of course, you can Google all types of websites, okay? You can go to the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. They've got a website that contains book list and other resources, and they've got the kid-friendly format. So you can send these materials, these resources home with your kids and encourage the families to read together and to do the activities together. Now, when you're doing a lesson such as this, ensure that there's an opportunity for families to be involved in the lesson on a variety of levels. We talked about bringing in tubes. We talked about bringing in paper towel rolls. We talked about going home and reading together. A variety of levels. This is extremely important because we don't want to discount anyone or take anything for granted. Some people may not have some of the things that you're asking them to bring into your classroom. So you don't want anybody to ever feel uncomfortable or any child to ever feel discounted. Another aspect or way to expand this lesson would be to do a taste test activity in your classroom. And when you do the taste test activity, because we all love to taste, and when you're doing these taste testing activities, sometimes your parents haven't maybe experienced some of these vegetables either. If you're doing a taste test and you have the opportunity, provide enough for the families to participate in the activity, okay? Some extra carrots, some extra broccoli, or what have you. And ensure that you make this available during the prime hours. Prime pickup and drop-off hours. We all know when the bulk of our kids come in and when the bulk of our kids leave. So make sure that they can take advantage, that you take advantage of that time. And maybe add a voting component to that. Something very simple, something that the kids can help usher their parents through. They'll say, hey, Mom, this is how you do this. Our kids always want to teach us something.
Right. That's fun.
The purpose for the lesson is to share information and involve the parent around the child's learning. Family participation in the learning is very important if you want to have a lasting effect on this child's life. Engaging families around the topics of health and nutrition, it is challenging. It's extremely challenging. The key is to be intentional and reflective in the process. And always remember to adhere to the strategies critical to family engagement. The first element is always assume the best of our families. Assume that they love their kids. Because it is around the family's love for that child that you can build a relationship and engage in a conversation about the health and nutrition. Other strategies we discussed today included making time for intentional listening to the families. Now, I know this can be challenging. You have a classroom, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 kids entering and exiting. That's hard. But when you make time to connect with a parent and a child, this shows the parent how much you're interested in them. And during that listening time, be open to different perspectives and respect the culture of the family.
Yes.
Food, food, food. Food for many of us is attached to important memories and relationships, and it's just so critical for us to remember that. we never want to discount any experiences. Seek opportunities to build relationships with families through communication and collaboration. Now, sometimes this means that you may need to show yourself as a parent or a child. Remember, going outside your role as the expert. You need to encourage families to participate in the lesson planning process and the classroom learning, and partner with the families in the development of goals for their child. Remember, when we're able to partner with that young mom, then we were able to get them the supports that they needed. When the opportunity allows, move away from the rigid confines of our curriculum. Go outside, use that creative energy that you have as teachers, and create lessons that engage physical activity and science and math around concepts of health and nutrition. Remember, in order to have a lasting effect on the health and nutrition of the students, we must engage the families. And we must engage our families around their love and our affection for the child.